just one super marquee game that I feel like we should just focus on that one today. We'll get to everything else on Friday. And the game I'm talking about is that top 10 matchup in Columbus, Penn State at Ohio State. Ohio State, a 4-point favorite in the DraftKings Sportsbook, the over-under set at 48. And what's interesting about this game, think you can argue, I don't even know that it's a debate. Out of everyone in the top 10, teams that we're talking about as legitimate national championship contenders or playoff contenders, feels like Penn State is the one we know the least about. They haven't had they didn't have a super marquee out of conference game. Ohio State played Notre Dame, LSU played Florida State, whatever. And then on top of that, they haven't really hit the meat of their Big Ten schedule yet. So they're coming in at 6-0. And I would argue, I don't think we know a ton about them. Their wins are over West Virginia, Delaware, who else? Illinois, Iowa, Northwestern, and UMass. Forgive me, it hasn't been the most gauntlet of a schedule. So you could say like Michigan, we don't know much about, but even Michigan, they've got a 2-year track record. They've won the Big Ten. So we kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. Well, I just don't think anybody really knows what to make of this Penn State team. Well, what I will tell you, they're certainly in for a huge challenge, but they're also a really, really, really good team. And it's interesting because I remember last week in this spot talking about Oregon being one of the more balanced teams in college football. I think Penn State absolutely has to be in that conversation as well. Because when you look at Penn State, and again, I get that the competition has not been great. There isn't really an obvious weakness to what they do, okay? So first of all, on offense, they have a guy that many believe will be a future first-round quarterback in Drew Aller. He's awesome. 12 touchdowns, no interceptions this year. They lead the Big Ten in rushing. They have the best offensive tackle in college football who's going to be a top 10 pick next year, Olu Fashanu. And so, first of all, first-round quarterback eventually. He's not eligible for this year. Number one rush attack, 2 really good backs, offensive tackle who's going in the top 10 of the draft. That's pretty good. They take care of the football. They're number 2 in the country in turnover margin. As I said, Drew Aller has not thrown an interception yet. They're number 2 in the time of possession, which means they beat the crap out of you at the line of scrimmage. And then, oh, by the way, they're even better on defense. It's kind of wild. First of all, it's wild because the top 3 scoring defenses in college football are Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. So that's kind of an interesting nugget. But Penn State, really good against the run, really, really good against the pass. Number 1 pass defense in all of college football, have 7 interceptions in 6 games. They're just really good across the board. So that's what you need to know about Penn State. If you haven't watched Penn State, that's what you need to know. They've been good at everything so far this season. Now, admittedly, it's going to be a completely different test against Ohio State. From the Ohio State perspective, considering that really only, I would argue, that Notre Dame game was a super marquee game, feels like we kind of know who they are, right? But we kind of know that offense isn't quite as good as it's been in years past, but the defense is the best that it's been. And I'll defend Ryan Day, right? I've been a very critical, a vocal critic of Ryan Day. But at the end of the day, when I look at what he said a few weeks ago with Lou Holtz, didn't love him going after Lou Holtz, but I think the narrative that Ohio State's soft, that was maybe true 2, 3, 4 years ago. It ain't true this year. They are tough. They are physical. They are really good on defense. Now, the big story for Ohio State coming in, and this is really important, they are really beat up, like abnormally beat up coming into this game. So last week against Purdue, and I get they're playing Purdue. They think, we want to rest guys to get ready for Penn State. But here are among the players who did not play against Purdue. Their best running back, their leading rusher, Travion Henderson, did not play. Their third leading rusher, Mayan Williams, did not play. Their second leading wide receiver, Emeka Egbuka, did not play. Oh, by the way, during the game, their second leading rusher, Chip Trayanum, game-winning touchdown against Notre Dame, gets hurt, leaves the game. And their best cornerback, Denzel Burke, gets hurt and leaves the game. And so on Tuesday, Ryan Day did his press conference. He was very non-committal about who's available and who's not. And I'm sure some of these guys will play. And again, I'm sure some of them were held out for precaution because it was Purdue. But there's at least a possibility that Ohio State is without its top 3 running backs, its number 2 wide receiver, and its number 1 corner. That is insane. And I would add this. Thank you, everybody, as always, for your support of the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. And we have a major announcement as legal sports betting is now in the state of Kentucky. That is right. The Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube has partnered with DraftKings Sportsbook and the DraftKings Sportsbook app. And here is the best part. DraftKings has an incredible offer for listeners of the Aaron Torres Pod who are first-time customers with DraftKings. This is the deal. Here's what you need to know. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Bet $5 on any game, just $5, and you get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you use the promo code TORRES. That's right. It's that simple. Again, first-time customers, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, bet $5 on any game, pro, college, any sport you want, and get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you use the code TORRES. Thank you to our new partners, DraftKings Sportsbook. Thrilled to be working with them. Take advantage of their offer now. I've heard some whispers that Kyle McCord is not even close to 100%. He's got a lower body injury. That's where I don't want to say he struggled because he threw for over 300 yards last week, but where he's missing some throws. And I don't think Marvin Harrison is 100% either. He's had a couple things throughout the season. So Ohio State is really banged up coming into this game. The good news is, as I said, that defense is good. And I think ultimately, if Ohio State is to win this game, I think it ultimately comes down to that defense. Now, if you remember last year, Penn State actually had the lead going into the fourth quarter in Happy Valley, and it was the defense that took over. I believe, if my memory is correct, 3 turnovers forced in the fourth quarter. That was the game that JT Tuimoloau allowed, the defensive lineman, who's himself a top 15, top 20 pick, maybe even higher. Maybe that's insulting. Maybe he's top 10 pick. That was his breakout game. Multiple forced fumbles. A pick 6, or he had an interception. I don't remember if it was pick 6. Point being, this was a breakout game for Ohio State's defense last year. And bluntly, if Ohio State is going to win this game, that is to me how it's going to have to be done. I don't think you're moving the ball up and down the field on this Penn State defense. But at the same time, this Penn State offense does have some questions, most notably at quarterback. Drew Aller, great recruit, great talent, but he certainly hasn't faced the type of talent on defense that he is going to face from Ohio State. And again, ultimately, can you get pressure on him? Can you make him uncomfortable? Can you make him make mistakes? At the end of the day, though, it's time to make a pick, and I'm just going to be blunt. I like Penn State to go into Columbus, and I like Penn State to win this game outright. And let me explain why. It's really a few things. One, I just think Penn State is really good. Now, remember, by the way, I picked Penn State to make the college football playoff. My college football playoff 4 before the season was Michigan as the Big Ten champion, Alabama as the SEC champ, Florida State as the ACC champ, and then Penn State as an at-large. We'll see if it holds up, but I have liked Penn State. I have believed in Penn State. And an important note in this game, I think for the first time, maybe in a decade, you can legitimately argue Penn State has as much talent as Ohio State. Not a knock on Ohio State, not a knock on Ryan Day, not trying to tear down Ryan Day. But at the same time, James Franklin's been very vocal about this. They have built a roster to compete with Ohio State. He saw the speed and the athleticism of this team about 3, 4, 5 years ago. And he said, we got to do something comparable to that. By the way, it's why they've struggled with Michigan, because Michigan's just run the ball right at you and beat you up at the line of scrimmage. Neither here nor there. We'll preview Penn State, Michigan when the time comes. But when I look at this game, Penn State, I think they probably have more dudes going into this game. Remember, we talked about this in August. Bruce Feldman's Freaks list came out. Boy, by the way, busy day for Bruce Feldman on today's show, right? We just talked about him with the Jimbo Fisher report. But then also on top of that, Bruce Feldman does the Freaks list every year, the freakiest players in college football. Penn State set a record this year for the number of guys on that list. I think they had 5 or 6. And so they have the talent. On defense, Chop Robinson on the edge is a first-round talent. Abdul Carter at linebacker is not draft eligible this year, but he will be a first-rounder when he is draft eligible. And that secondary is the best secondary that Ohio State has seen all year, although Notre Dame was good and Notre Dame really limited the passing attack. So you have, I think, comparable talent. You have a rested Penn State team. This is an important part. And we talked about this in August, and this is part of why I picked Penn State to make the college football playoff. Look at how the schedule broke for Penn State. 2 weeks ago, they had a bye. Last week, they had UMass. Love UMass. Love the Minutemen. Shout out John Calipari, that 96 Final Four team. But at the same time, like they've basically had 3 full weeks to get ready for Ohio State, but more importantly, to get healthy for Ohio State. Meanwhile, Ohio State, they played Notre Dame, physical game, go into their bye. Maryland and Purdue, neither of those teams is a gauntlet by any stretch, but those are back-to-back Big Ten games. Maryland gave them, fits for a half, whatever. And so you look at Ohio State, they're more beat up. Penn State is rested. Penn State, you look at the numbers, and I had somebody send me something this week. Like, you look at the number of snaps that these guys have played, they just haven't played nearly as much or had to play nearly as much as Ohio State because the competition hasn't been as good. So they're well rested, 2 weeks, really 3 to prepare. And the last thing I'll say, I do think, and this is something Ohio State fans are upset about, the big noon kickoff hurts Ohio State. It just does. We can argue, we can debate, we can this, we can that, we can the other thing. But you look at how the schedule breaks, and you look at the fact that this is a noon kickoff instead of a 7:30 Eastern time ABC game. I have no skin in the game. I'm excited to have it at noon. But at the same time, it's just not going to be the same atmosphere. It's going to be a great atmosphere. Buckeye Horseshoe, Buckeye Nation, the horseshoe is going to be popping. But for this game to be a noon kickoff, that is a tough break for Ohio State because they could have used the crowd support in their favor. So in the end, this is the only game I'm picking today. I'll do the rest of my picks on Friday. But give me Penn State in a close, low-scoring 21-17 game. I like Penn State to go into the horseshoe and get the win outright. Won't be betting the over-under because I think it's low-scoring. But I like Penn State to win this game.